My name is Mazi Mutafa, Executive Director of Words, Beats, and Life. And I graduated in, I think, like 2006. I was supposed to graduate a few years earlier, but I was working on my senior thesis. It had to be 30 pages long, and for some reason, mine was 185. And I just couldn't figure out what I was going to cut. I was a student at the University of Maryland. I was a part of a lot of different student groups. And like a lot of folks, I didn't necessarily have access to particular ideas. So like I didn't even understand what a nonprofit was until probably my senior year, where we were hosting a career fair. And a friend of mine was running a hip hop nonprofit. And I was like, what is a hip hop nonprofit? And he explained it to me. And then I realized that I'd been surrounded by nonprofits my whole life. I just never knew that that's what they were. And so that experience of being a student leader really gave me access to budgets and gave me access to programming and rooms and space. And so that's really, I would say, the beginnings of me thinking about entrepreneurship, but it's really more about community organizing and community building. And the nonprofit or the business becomes a vehicle to do that. Well, I was actually sitting in Roy Rogers my freshman year, and I was at the table with the person that was the president of the Black Student Union the year before I got there. His name is Sophia Robb. And I asked him, what's the one thing you wished you had done as BSU president that you didn't do? And he said, I wish I had created a world-class hip hop conference that brought people from all over the world to the University of Maryland. And so when I became the president in my junior year, I did the one thing my mentor said he hadn't. And then after creating that conference, I created a nonprofit really just to continue that conference at the University of Maryland. But undergraduates decided they didn't need the help of alumni. They would continue it. It actually continues to this day, not under the name of Words, Beats, and Life, but as the Black Student Union Hip Hop Festival. It's actually, that, to be honest, is that's a great thing, but it's also one of my regrets, because the reason why it wasn't the Black Student Union Hip Hop Conference when I was there is because we worked with the Pride Alliance, with the Jewish Student Union, with the Muslim Student Association, the President's Office, the Latino Student Union, the Asian American Student Union, because I recognized, 20 years ago that hip hop wasn't just about the innovations of African American and Puerto Rican youth in New York City, but about the contributions of the whole human family to expression, to storytelling, to community building, which is why we're Words, Beats, and Life. Because the words, it's about building a common language, a common understanding, and recognizing that hip hop is human expression, not just the expression of a particular community. I like to talk about it as a set of 5 priorities: arts education, creative employment, cultural diplomacy, centering marginalized voices, and further culture. So arts education, we run after school and summer programming, now teaching 20 classes that are either directly hip hop or hip hop adjacent. So like we'll do things like chess and photography, poetry, in addition to rapping, DJing, beat production, multiple styles of dance. So that's the arts education piece, but there's also now an adult element that we partnered with Airbnb to do experiences where adults are like, oh man, I wish I could have done that DJ. Well, now you can do that DJ thing. Now you can do that beat production thing, just as a one-time activity as a fee for service, which is a great way to support the organization to keep those programs free for young people. The second is creative employment, because so many of the young people who are interested in the arts don't necessarily make it a priority to learn how to make a business of it. My favorite way to frame this is like there's a line by Jay-Z where it says, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. So this idea that you can be a sole proprietor, you can have your own company at an early age and not necessarily be looking for a job, but working to create your own. We talk about that in the frame of creating your own future. And that shows up in things like career fairs that are creative business focused, where people are looking for interns or employees. It also shows up in our alternative winter and alternative spring break activities, where we bring in guest speakers or take young people to other cities to see what creative industries look like in other places, or right here in Washington, D.C. The third, I think I said, was centering marginalized voices. Right now, that's really focused around a specific set of projects around lifting up Muslim contributions to hip hop. We have an initiative called From Ciphers to Ciphers, Hip Hop is Muslim. And that's had original theatrical productions, gallery shows. We're working on a docu-series now called At the Table, looking at the connections between food pioneers and the artistic pioneers of communities, Muslim communities around the country. Trying to tell a story that's kind of hidden in plain sight, kind of like those nonprofits that were surrounding me that I didn't see because I didn't know what to look for. The same thing I think is true for Muslims in many instances, that we are in media, in creative sectors, but we're not wearing a badge that says, hey, by the way, I'm a Muslim. So people don't know. So we want to lift up those stories. Fourth was cultural diplomacy, where we send artists abroad and bring artists from abroad to the US. Usually abroad, it's us doing master classes or performances or hosting retreats or creating murals. I'm really proud to say we've been to, I think, almost 20 countries. And all that work began because a friend of mine who was also a Terp by the name of Trevor Young was in a vehicle and met someone who was from Uganda, who was a rapper, and just said, hey, Trevor introduced me to that person. He said, hey, why don't you come to Uganda? And I was like, how are we going to get to Uganda? And we found some money, and now we've been going to Uganda for the last 10 years, along with the other countries that we visit. And the last thing is for the culture, because all the things I've said up to this point are kind of like, we use hip hop to do this, or we, for the culture is literally hip hop for its own sake. So that's things like breakdance battles or paint jams or concerts, the things that people know, would recognize clearly as something that's hip hop. Versus a lot of the other things we do are hip hop is the base, but it's not necessarily the whole thing. Like we created the world's first hip hop chess tournament where we made connections between the game that are made in the music, but then also connected it to other things. Like I'm a big fan of helping people to see connections that aren't necessarily obvious, but if you look closely, you can see them. I think the most important thing when running a nonprofit, and it's probably because I'm the lead fundraiser, the money is really important. And I know that a lot of times money is not what motivates people to start, particularly a nonprofit venture, because of what it's called. It's a nonprofit, which means it's not about the profit. But there has to be profit, even in a nonprofit. It's just not for you personally, it's for the actual company. And so I wish that someone had told me that every year you have to re-raise your budget. Like every year, some of those people will remain, but everyone will eventually leave. So you always have to be expanding your base, expanding who knows and values what you do. Because early on, one of the scariest things was that there were 5 people on planet Earth who were responsible for probably 80% of our budget. And if one of them, or let alone if 2 of them decided they didn't want us to exist, we could have been gone. And I didn't think about that when we first started, like the importance of building a base of support that's broad, and in some cases, not very deep. Like lots of little donors are just as important as a few big ones, because lots of little donors give you flexibility, give you a base of people to call upon, give you a potential audience for the things that you're doing. Like there's so many reasons why it's important to try to go broad and to recognize that the things that you're creating have value to people other than the ones that are obvious to you. Like even in fundraising, one of the things, if you're a person that's going to start a nonprofit and you're going to ask individuals, you might think, well, I know all the people that are going to give me money because they're rich or they have all. And the truth is that probably 90% of the people who donated to Words, Beats, and Life were the people I thought would not donate because I didn't think they had it, or I didn't think that they valued it enough, or that they didn't see themselves as philanthropists. And so be open to the fact that the people who will become your base might not be who you originally thought. I mean, I think the University of Maryland is central to not just my venture, but to my identity. The reality is I wouldn't be the person that I am had I gone to another school for a range of reasons, including the mentors that I had, the classes I took, the extracurricular activities. I started 4 different student groups as an undergrad. I was the president of the Black Student Union. I was the president of my chapter of Phi Beta Sigma. So I had lots of kind of leadership experience. And I say kind of because one of the biggest downsides to being a student leader often is that the groups, because they're voluntary and done by people who have GPA priorities, are often under-personed. So it's a couple of people doing a lot of the work. And so in that sense, I never really thought about myself, maybe really until very recently, as like a leader. I've always thought of myself as a manager, or more importantly, as a worker. So I'd be a person that no task is beneath me. So no one who works with me, I feel like, should have tasks that are beneath them. And that really comes out of that University of Maryland experience, like witnessing, being a person that worked at the Namburu Cultural Center, setting up tables for other people's events and breaking down, like doing that kind of putting that sweat equity into the community. But the second piece is since I graduated from the University of Maryland, that some of our probably more than half of our founding board members were from the University of Maryland. Today we're a team of 84 people. And I'd say of those 84, about 20 of them are University of Maryland alum. So University of Maryland alum have been an integral part of the actual sustaining and growth of Words, Beats, and Life, and people who are faculty today.